Okay. So you were the founder of Unite Asia, an awesome Asian-oriented heavy music website. And are you still playing in a band, or is that pretty much a thing of the past?
No, I'm definitely still playing in a band. So King Ly Chee was the previous band I was in. That I spent like 18 years of my life with that one, and that ended. I can't actually remember. It was like 2017, and right before that band ended, because I was singing in that band, but I'm actually a guitarist. So in January of that year, I started another band called Dagger,
Oh,
where
okay.
I was playing guitar in. So that band is still around.
Oh, nice. So I guess tell me a little bit about how you fell into this wonderful world of music. I mean, being in Hong Kong, it's not something that we ever hear too much over here about bands. We're more familiar with the Hong Kong movie scene, but not really the music scene. So tell me a little bit about how you fell into music.
Well, I went to an international school in Hong Kong, so I was surrounded by a lot of overseas kids, so like American kids and kids from all over the world, really. But I mean, I think I actually got into music prior to that. Like, I don't really know. I've been trying to figure out exactly too how I got into it. But I just do know very clearly at a very young age that that rock or heavier music was more
Mhm.
my cup of tea. Like I am someone that is Pakistani, but I grew up in Hong Kong and I went to an international school. So there's like this huge identity crisis for myself where like I didn't know where I fit in. Like at home I spoke Urdu, in on the streets it's Cantonese, but there was English at school. So it was just like, and then I had this awkward situation where my own parents were very traditional Muslim Pakistani, and they totally didn't understand all of this Western stuff that I was bringing home, like like Western attitudes and very American style of conversation and you just little subtle nuances that are a little bit more too Western. So they had no idea what was going on. So like we just constantly be like in constant conflict in our lives in my house. And I just knew that the only thing that made sense to me was heavy music and like this just blaring drums, loud guitars in my ear was the only way that made sense to me. And so I got into that really young. I mean, but it was bands like honestly when I first got into it was like bands like Guns N' Roses and Van Halen and like stuff like that. Like and I don't really know. I actually don't really know how I found my way into that, but it must have been like the circle of people that were around me that were already listening to it. I had some older friends that were already listening to it. So that's kind of how I got into like rock, at least.
Okay. Was it easy to find Western music in Hong Kong? A lot of Asian countries, when you hear about people, how they got into music, it's a little difficult in some countries to get music, but how accessible was getting music over there?
I think, well, I mean, for me, it was the 80s. So in the 80s, it wasn't actually that hard. It was all cassettes anyway, but it was like, it wasn't like every store you walked into had like a hard rock or metal section, but there were a
Yeah.
lot of like music stores, right? There was a lot of cassette and I think CDs might have just started coming out or something like that. But for me, it was just cassettes. But the problem, what I remember from back then was that anything new that came out, like, Motley Crue or whatever it
Mhm.
was, it wouldn't arrive in Hong Kong. I mean, this is my recollection. I don't really know if it's actually true or not, but
Yeah.
my recollection was that it was months behind. So anything that came out of the States would take like 3 or 4 months or maybe even half a year before it showed up in Hong Kong. However, at that time, I wasn't in the know of new bands. So I was just like walking down stores and I would see like the Iron Maiden section. I would see the AC/DC section or buy
Mhm.
cassettes from there. It was just like, oh, I was just keeping up with whatever was present at the time.
Oh, okay. Were you a tape trader at any point in your life, or in terms of getting music from overseas?
No, that's a good question. I don't think I was. I didn't even know about that there was a community behind this. It was just
Yeah.
music to me. I had no clue. I was just consuming it at a young age, just easily influenced by whatever it was. As long as it was rock, that's all I care about. So I never really got into like the history behind it and the cultures behind it until much later.
Okay. And I remember you were talking about it. You went to university in the States, is that right?
Yeah, I went to University of Massachusetts, so in on the East Coast in '94 to '98.
Okay. How, what was that like? I mean, growing up in Hong Kong, and then now you're moving to another country, and then it's like it must have been somewhat of a culture shock for you as well, even though you've read about things about America.
Oh, dude, it was the biggest culture shock, man. I mean, I remember. I mean, it was just interesting because I was going to an American international school in Hong Kong, so I was completely surrounded, immersed in American culture. You know, I was
Mhm.
skateboarding at the time, listened to punk rock, metal, everything. You know, like I read English is like my main language. It's like my first language, even though I speak Urdu and Cantonese and Mandarin. English is the one that I'm most comfortable in. So I
Okay.
had no idea what I was in store for. And I remember my college counselor in high school sat me down. She's like, okay, look, you're going to a town called Amherst, which is like 2 hours west of Boston. And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what 2 hours west of anything means. You know what I mean? I grew up in Hong Kong. We don't have 2 hours of anything here. You know, like I'd be in China if it was 2 hours, you know? So she was trying to explain that like it's a small town. It's gonna be a very different vibe. And all I could do was just try to figure out like where in Hong Kong she meant. You know what I mean? So she's like,
Yeah.
you know, like all I could think about was like these little village towns in Hong Kong. But those village towns are not that far away. They're like 20 minutes away from the city. So I was like, you know, there's a place called Stanley. I was like Stanley? She's like, no, not like Stanley. You know, like she couldn't believe it. She's just like, all right, just whatever. You'll figure it out when you get there.
Okay.
And I remember like there's so many things that were just so like vivid and like I'm like, what is going on? I remember because we had to fly to San Francisco first. And of course, I'm a
Mhm.
skateboarder. So when I got to San Francisco, like we were driving around, I'm like, that's that spot. That's that spot. Oh my God, I saw that in that video. Like I was just like, mind was blown. I'm like, this is the best. I'm going to love the next 4 years. Thinking Amherst, Western Massachusetts had to be similar to what I was seeing here. Like everything's tall buildings or whatever, like
Yeah.
similar to Hong Kong. Then we flew to Boston, same thing, driving around, so psyched. And then we got in the van to drive us to Amherst. And it was like the first time I've ever seen like the cityscape like disappear like in the rear view mirror, it just all disappeared and it turned into hills. And I'm like, I remember looking at it. I'm like to the driver, I'm like, where are we going? You know, he's like, oh, we're going to Amherst. I was like, is it anywhere near that? He's like, no, man. He's like, you see all these hills? That's what you're gonna be surrounded by. I was like, what? And then finally, when we got into Amherst, it was literally like every like show or sitcom I've ever seen in my life. Everything was
Yeah.
like 2 floors. Like the houses were actually like that. You know, we don't have
Yeah.
houses like that with like that kind of roof. And there was one tall building, and I was like, "This is crazy." So I just remember like that type of culture shock. And the other thing that I remember was shocking was, I mean, just so vivid was going to your supermarkets in the States, man. Like going in, I just wanted to buy milk and opening the refrigerator in the supermarket. I'm like, 1%, 2% calcium, no calcium. I'm like, what is? I just want milk. Like, where's just milk and like there's soybean milk? Like it was the choices you guys have. You guys are such a consumerist culture that that all of that was so shocking. The overwhelmingness of choice. You have so much choice. Like the cereal section, like was like aisles and aisles and aisles of cereal. You're like,
Yeah.
what? Like, it's just cereal, you know?
Yeah. Try telling that to an American. It's like it's just something. Yeah. It's not just something. So so while you were in Massachusetts, did you get to go see shows and discover music there too, or?
Yeah, I mean, prior to going to the States, you know, like by the time I got into the States, I was fully like a metalhead, complete metalhead. Like I
Mhm.
already been like 5 or 6 years into it. I was already like, you know, playing in school bands with friends of mine. So we would have like an annual band that we played in. We would play
Okay.
2 shows a year. Then the band breaks up and you start another one. It was like nothing serious. We had
Yeah.
no idea that you could record music on your own, you could release music on your own. There was no culture in Hong Kong that promoted that type of attitude that you could actually do something with your band. You know, like we had no idea. We just played. We just did covers. We did like Megadeth covers or whatever it was. So until then, until the States, I had never seen a show before, except for the ones that we played at, and like it was just our version of it. You know, like the push pit moshes or whatever it was. Had no idea what it was like until we got to the States, and I remember again so clearly sitting in the dorm room in Amherst, and like you know, I didn't know anybody, so I was just becoming friends with anyone. Right. So
Yeah.
like there was like I think a guy down the hall was like a Grateful Dead hippie kind of guy, and I didn't even know what that was, but he was just a nice guy, but he just smelled funny. I just remember that really well. He just smelled interesting, but he had long hair, and we just sit down and talk. And he would back then, like unlike now where you could just get all the information online. Back then it was all printed, right? So he
Yeah.
had like like the printed I don't know what it was called, like a newspaper kind of like you know what I mean, like the Village Voice in New York
Yeah.
City. So it was like the town newspaper, whatever it was. So he was just sitting there reading through it, and like, there's like a shows and events section.
Yeah.
And so he was just reading. He's like, "Oh, this is weird." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, there's some bands playing down the street." I'm like, "What?" And again, in my brain, I don't know what that means, right? So he's just like, "Oh, there's bands called what is this? Napalm Death." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Napalm Death and Obituary." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, these two bands are playing down the street." I'm like, "What do you mean down the street?" He's just like, "Oh, there's a town called Northampton. It's 20 minutes down." I'm like, "Napalm Death and Obituary are 20 minutes away?" He's like, "Have you heard of them?" I'm like, "Yes, let's go." I was like, "What do you mean?" And like, that was my first show. So we drove, we found a place. It's called Pearl Street in Northampton. There's like a line of like metalheads. I'm like, I've never seen this many metalheads in my life. It was just lines of people lining up to go in. And I walked in, and I remember the stage was like, it was like 2 feet, and there was no like barrier or anything like that.
Mhm.
And right when we had arrived, Obituary was playing. And I'm just in front of me, my friend, like in like that distance. Like, I've only seen them in magazines. I've only seen them in CD covers before. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "There's John Tardy with the hair." And he's screaming into them. I'm like, like, dude, it was mind blowing to me. I was like, I cannot believe it was like out of body experience. I'm like, what is going on? So Obituary's playing, they wrapped up, then Napalm Death got on stage. I remember getting on stage, like sitting, like just on stage, literally it was like 2 feet. I mean, like you could literally sit on the stage, sitting there, and the guitarist, I think it was Jesse, like the guy that passed away, like he was
Yeah.
playing, and I'm just sitting. I'm like, oh my god, I cannot, like literally watching him play was it was, dude. And then like from then, of course, like like a like typical American story where like you see one show, you're like, I need more, I need more. When's
Yeah.
the next show? And that was my life for the next 4 years.
Okay. So I know Hong Kong's got, and I know you talked about in past interviews, Hong Kong doesn't really have much of a known metal or punk scene, but do international bands tour there, or how much, and how much has that changed over the years?
Well, I mean, Hong Kong does have a metal scene. I don't like. I think what you mean is like it's not well known outside of Hong Kong. Like you said
Oh,
earlier,
okay.
like like our movie community is much more popular. It was. It
Yeah.
sucks now, but our movies used to be so amazing and so influential and so inspiring, and our music never caught up. I don't think our music ever caught up. That doesn't mean that there aren't bands killing it, but
Hmm.
they're known locally mainly. And so our metal bands here, even when I was getting into it and when I returned from college in 99, it just wasn't well known. I mean, like I
Hmm.
said earlier, like Hong Kong bands in the past, they didn't put a lot of heart or time into it. They never assumed they could do anything with it. So they never took it that seriously. When I returned in 99, most of the bands that played, they played like 15-minute, 20-minute sets. And 12 minutes of it would be covers. Like, they would do
Oh,
Korn covers, Limp Bizkit covers, stuff like that, and then throw one song in. So it's just a very different culture here, very different mindset. It's completely changed now, that's for sure. It's
yeah.
completely changed. And there are a lot more bands. A lot more bands are putting more pride into creating their own music. They put so much heart into like releasing music videos and stuff like that. However, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a language issue. They don't reach out beyond Chinese speaking regions. So Hong Kong bands often tour in Taiwan or mainland China, but they
Mhm.
don't go to the States. They don't try to get to Europe. They don't even try to get to Southeast Asia or Philippines, where the scene is exploding. It's so big down there. So it's just an interesting culture that we have. Bands having toured here, I would say bands only really started touring here in the past maybe 10 years or so. Like that
Oh,
there was a little bit more. We were more like a regional stop finally, because we finally had enough venues. We didn't have venues prior to maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
okay. Is that what got you inspired to putting together Unite Asia? Because I mean, you've dug up a lot of bands I've never heard of, but they're really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the main inspiration for that was just because once I got back here in 99 and like I completely so immersed in the American punk rock and hardcore scene, and not even the scene, it was just a mentality, man. Like, go do things yourself. That whole DIY ethos, like
Yeah.
I had embodied it. Like I didn't, like I was just like, anyone told me, they're like, oh, you can't really do that. I'd be like, what? Says who? I'm gonna go do it right now. Watch me. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, you can't start a magazine in Hong Kong. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna go photocopy this, what I'm writing right now. I'll photocopy it, make 100 copies and hand it out, and I'm done. You know, like in Hong
Yeah.
Kong, the mentality back then was like, you have to go get a sponsor. You need to get advertisers. It's got to look nice and it's got to look glossy right off the bat. Whereas a
Yeah.
punk rock is just like, just as raw as it, just go do it. Go do the
Yeah.
first step. And as you're doing it, you'll get better and it's going to look better. So like, I remember when I first came back, my main thing was, okay, why is there no punk rock scene here? Why is there no hardcore scene here? Why are the metal bands playing Limp Bizkit shit? You know, like, why aren't there like bands doing really great thing? And I knew there were bands. There just wasn't an explosion of bands from what I just came from. Like, American scene, one of the reasons why they don't know anything about bands outside of America is because the American scene is so big. You guys have so many bands. There's just enormous. And you have such a great ecosystem of labels and promoters and tour organizers and bands just like survive on this. You know what I mean? They have no clue. They're like, you guys are so consumed with your own world. They're like, Japan. I'm not going to think about Japan. There's this band from Boston that kills it right now. I'm just going to watch that instead, you know? And so for when I came back in Hong Kong, I just knew that I couldn't just be like this kind of guy that's just like educating people, because, you know, like, I'm the same way. If someone's trying to educate me, I'd be like, dude, shut up. I don't want to hear a single thing you're saying. I'm like, I don't care about this. And you sound like you know everything about it. And I was like, I did not want to come across that way at all, man. I would never, even to this day, 30 years later, I'll be like, I don't know much about hardcore or punk rock. I just love it. So I'm still learning every day. You know what I mean? And so when I came back in 99, I was like, what can I do to kind of bridge this gap? Because I noticed that when I came back, I'm like, interesting. The expat community, like the, you know, the kids that are from the UK or America, they were always in the know. So they were starting bands, but they were always singing in English, and they really just kind of stayed to their camp. Like, they're part of Hong Kong, whereas 96% of Hong Kong are Chinese, and there was no bridge. Like, these guys were not breaking through to the majority of Hong Kong. And I was like, why is it? Why isn't like the local people, they need to know what punk rock and metal is all about? There's all this anger that Hong Kong people have anyway. This is past 97, right? So I was like, you know what? Maybe it's a language thing. So I started a bilingual zine is what I did.
Okay.
So it was like, you know, I wrote everything in English. I found a bunch of local friends that would help me translate everything into Chinese. I can't even believe they did all that. So, and that's what I did. I started handing out these bilingual zines, and as I was handing it out, it really like took off.
Okay.
But then what I noticed was like, people still needed to see, right? I mean, the power of hardcore punk rock is watching it. And like, I grew up as a metalhead, man. I grew up as a metalhead. And for me, when I first heard Bad Religion, I was like, the lyrics were great. I'm like, but these are all power chords. You know, I was such an idiot. I was like, these are all power chords, man. There's no riffs in it. Like, there's nothing like, you know, there's nothing technical about it. Like, no clue until I saw it with my own eyes in the States. I was like, whoa, this is so much more powerful than watching Obituary and Napalm, that which was great too. But when I saw Sick of It All, dude, my head exploded. Like, that was like a complete life-changing experience. And so I knew I had to do that. And so I started the band King Ly Chee. Okay. With the whole idea, like, you know, I showed them the hardcore punk rock thing. And then once I started touring around Asia, then I was like, oh my God, look how good these bands are. And I just kept tabs with them, just kept, you know, keeping track of what they were doing, what all my friends were doing, built this massive network. And then in 2015, I was just so tired of clicking into Lambgoat or Punk News or Blabbermouth or Metal Sucks and never reading about anything from a band from Kuala Lumpur or Singapore. And I'm like, why don't like, and like, I just love consuming music, and I just love music. And I was like, always, when I wake up in the morning, that's the first thing I would do is go read through all that. I'm like, God, man, I don't know anything about the band in Singapore. Like, I literally would have to text the band and be like, hey, what's up with you guys, man? You guys any news? And they're like, yeah, we're about to release a record. I'm like, interesting. I'm like, I wish these sites would know. And I'm like, fuck it, I'll just start it. You know what I mean? And like, I had enough context where I was like, I think I'd be able to get content pretty easily. I didn't realize that literally it would consume my life for 5 years, and I would have that much content, easily put up 20 or 30 posts a day. Yeah. And that's really the catalyst, man. It was just like, I needed to do something where I was like, for my own self, need a place to house all this information that I kept easily could reach out and get, but I wasn't getting, you know what I mean? So I just created that site. That's what the inspiration was.
Oh, cool. So most of the bands that they're just people that you've known from all these years.
Yeah, from touring. I mean, like, I would say in the beginning, that's what I would do. I would just tap into all my friends, all my great friends that were just
Mhm.
like, I mean, I don't even really know how to explain it to people. Like, you know, like people when they first hear bands from Asia, they're like, "Oh, how good could it be?" Until they actually hear, and they're like, "God damn, that band is great!" I'm like, "I
Yeah.
know," you know what I mean? I know. They're like, "Why have I not heard about this?" I'm like, "It's not your fault, dude. If you live in the U.S., if you live in Europe, or you live in the U.K., like you have so much of your own things that are so awesome that you're not going to be able to hear it. So that's why the site is here." I'm like, "So now just keep tabs." Make sure you've bookmarked the site and just go check it out every day. And it's just like, it started, like you're saying, like with bands I knew. And then
Mhm.
like, I honestly, the past maybe, God, past 3 or 4 years, it's just people here in Asia are so stoked that there's a site where they can put their news in. So they just send it to me. And I honestly, part of the 80% of the bands that I put up, I've never heard of them before. I don't know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a year because I used to go to Japan and I remember discovering bands over there, and then they're a little bit ahead of the rest of Southeast Asia, not by much, but but they just have that connection to the rest of the world. But they have the language barrier where there were bands that sound like Limp Bizkit or they sound like 80s thrash, and but the problem is half the guys, they would scream their head off in English, but then when you try to talk to them, they can't speak a lick of English, and that always became an issue. So but I figured with a lot of these bands that you're dealing with in Southeast Asia, most of them do speak English. Is that right? Or
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. With Japan and Korea and China and Hong Kong and Taiwan, I would definitely say now things are a little bit different. There is
Mhm.
a lot more English being spoken, and a lot of people are trying. But I know, like historically, a lot of these places like kind of shied away from any type of communication or conversation in English, even
Yeah.
though they were singing in English, right? But the further south you go, that's the way I kind of explain. Like the further south you go into Asia, the better the English is actually.
Okay.
So Philippines, like you start going from the Philippines down into like Malaysia and Singapore and Indonesia, man, everybody speaks English there. You know, Indonesia, they might not be like most perfect or most fluent or most grammatically correct, but they can converse. And people in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Philippines are so they love, out of all the places in Asia, I feel like they're the ones that want to communicate with the outside world the most.
Yeah.
They're so excited. They're so like, if you're interested in Indonesian, man, they're like, bro, I'm gonna hit you up on here and here and here and here.
Yeah.
I'll send you this info, that info. Like they really want to communicate and connect and network with the outside world. And it makes sense because in terms of punk rock and hardcore, those are the places that got it first. And I don't mean
Okay.
like they got the music first. I mean, they got it, right? Mentally, they got it first. They understood the networkness, the DIY-ness, the how we can make it happen on our own. And so that's why it's so rich there. That's why they're always in the know, man. Like if you hear
Yeah.
Malaysian bands compared to bands from Hong Kong or compared to bands from China, like Malaysian bands are like on par with the world. You know what I mean? Singapore's on par with the world. Everywhere else in Asia is kind of like getting there. It used to be like
Yeah.
this. They're getting there now.
Okay. So based on what you know, what kind heavy bands exist? Do you ever cover bands from like mainland China, or is that something that they're having their own battles with the government over there, where they're not able to express as freely as most people might think? Or what are your experiences with dealing with bands from the mainland?
Well, I've been touring mainland China since '99. I've been the
Okay.
first time we went up to play. My band King Ly Chee was in Guangzhou in '99. And right from the get go, I was like, oh my God, China's enormous. I mean, not the country. Of course, the country is huge. I
Yeah.
mean, the scene is enormous because punk rock and metal has been there since the 80s, man. 80s, like metal was completely embraced. Like metal there is got a long, long history. The bands there as well in terms of metal because of that long history, like are highly incredible, top caliber bands. And
Hmm.
in the early days of when I was going up there, a lot of those bands were able to live off of their music. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
already a different level of musicianship, right? Yeah, different level of musicianship, different level of professionalism because they're like, oh, I gotta be awesome, man. I this pays my bills. I pay my rent based on my band, which is not the case in other parts of Asia, man. Definitely not in Hong Kong. No one lives off of their music in Hong Kong. Even pop bands don't live off of their music in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
So yeah, the Chinese scene is enormous. Of course, if you're talking about lyrical content and their the way they handle their bands and stuff, they just have to be very clever. So their lyrics are like very, very poetic. And so
Okay.
that's the only way they can survive. Whereas other bands, if they are going to say anything about, political or just slightly sensitive, they do it in English so that it's not as easy to decipher the content.
Okay. And then back to your former band, King Ly Chee. So have you ever toured outside of Asia, like been to like Australia or US even once, or was that or was it just Asia that you toured?
Yeah, our main focus was Asia, of course, but of course we were like anytime anyone wanted to bring us anywhere, we worked hard, man. Like I'm definitely like a salesman for the band for anything I do, really. I'm like the biggest salesman, right? So I tried our best. So in '06, finally we were invited to go out to Europe. It was mainly Eastern Europe, so we went like Slovakia, played a bunch in Germany,
Okay.
Austria, Czech Republic, and then so we did about a week in there. And that was awesome, man. That was such a great experience. And then finally, which is crazy, is that in 2013 I put on Sick of It All's first show in Hong Kong.
Oh,
So like the band that got me into hardcore was I finally brought them to Hong Kong, and that was, dude, that was another mind. That was insane, man. When I heard the songs that I listened to growing up on the stage in Hong Kong where I grew up, it was crazy. But I became really good friends with them, and they, on their 30th anniversary tour in the States, they called our band out. They brought our band out.
oh,
So
nice.
we went and toured. We played 4 shows in USA in whatever it was, 2016. So we went to Boston, DC, Philly, and then ended in New York City. It was unbelievable, man.
Okay, so that's how you got Lou to.
Yeah, I mean, Lou is because I built that relationship when I put on their show here, and then we just like we just hit it off. I hit it off with all 4 of them, and like it was like, honestly, it was almost like we were brothers from the start, man. It was just so cool, but it was just so like such a mind warp, dude. Like I'm
Yeah.
like the band that got me into it, the first band that I saw in terms of hardcore. And like I listened to their music for like 20, 30 years. And then now I picked them up from the airport, and they were just such cool dudes. You know what I mean? Like often when you meet your favorite bands, like you're just in your brain, you're like, dude, just be cool, please. I want to continue to listen to your music, and if you're dicks, I'm not going to listen to your music anymore. And they were just the nicest guys, so humble, so like appreciative, so grateful. There's this guy in Hong Kong that was taking them around, like taking them like the best restaurants and stuff, and then we just hit it up and we just kept in touch. And then I was like, oh, let me just try. I'm like, hey, Lou, like, so my band's about to release a new record. I've got the song. Wonder if you'd be into singing. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay. Were you guys ever signed, or was that all pretty much you self-released it?
Yeah, man. I again, me being the salesman, I tried. I tried hard to like be like, hey, we're from Hong Kong, man. And like we're actually, like, I'm not to sound big headed or like arrogant at all. Like, I mean, we're in China and Hong Kong, we're a big deal. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
actually in Asia, we're a big deal. King Ly Chee was. I don't mean Dagger or anything like that, but like King Ly Chee was a big deal. It was a band that was around for a long time. I was a very like a huge proponent of supporting Asian hardcore and punk rock, so people knew who I was in the band and all that stuff. So I kind of used that. I was like, we're considered like China's first official hardcore band and stuff like that. So like I kind of used that, but it's one of those things, man. They're like, well, if you don't tour here, man, if you don't tour here, it's hard for us to like put out records and put money into your band, and I totally get it. Totally. So it never happened, man. Like King Ly Chee never got signed. Like we did kind of get signed in Hong Kong to a local label, but they weren't really a label, just a bunch of friends, really good friends that helped us out and stuff like that. But I mean, it was mainly on our own. Like we put our own money in releasing records, put our own money in like videos, distribution, me walking around with a bag full of CDs and stuff, and like going to the post offices and mailing these records out to people. It was all DIY.
Okay. So through Unite Asia, who are some that you've discovered? I mean, whether you're friends with them or you've just found by whether they contacted you or however they got a hold of you, that you're like, I'm not sure about this, but then later listening to it, you're going, wow, this is a lot better than I ever thought it would be. Or
Yeah, I mean, I would say almost like 99% of the stuff that comes in, if I'm not familiar with them, when it comes in
Hmm.
blows me away, man. I mean, it is. I mean, I can't even really name bands off the top of my head. It's just because there's been so many. You know what I mean? It's been
Yeah.
5 years of literally daily posts. It can be up to like 20 or 30 posts a day. I mean, what I could tell you is the humility in these bands. That's the thing that I feel like is the most. It's just the most breathtaking thing about running this site is the humility of like stuff that people send in. So like often, especially in Indonesia. So
Hmm.
bands in Indonesia will often send me stuff and like, you know, like their English might be broken or whatever. They're like, hey, you know, if you have a chance, check out my band or whatever. And of course, like I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Click
Yeah.
play on it. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, this is incredible. And like in terms of Indonesia, it's every genre under the sun. Whatever you can think of, they have it. It could be the
Yeah.
most awkward, most like it would be like crust punk, D-beat, hardcore punk, ska, like whatever it is. And they'll send it to me and they're like super humble, like, hey, if you have time, check it out, press play. And every single time I'm like, I can't believe how good this is. And like
Yeah.
I'll write back, I'm like, are you kidding me? You must be huge in Indonesia. They're like, no, we just started the band like 5 months ago. I'm like, and this is your first debut track? This is
Yeah.
incredible. Like, and so that's often it's been my reaction to bands is because of their humility that they send their stuff. It's like it fuels me to be like, go check out this band. I write a
Yeah.
massive post and like put it up on IG, Twitter, whatever it is, and like that honestly for the past 5 years has been the fuel for and fire for the site. And that's why I haven't stopped doing it. Is I'm like, go check this band out. This band rules. How have you not known him? You know what I mean? And that is like across the board. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm like knowledgeable in every genre. I am not, dude. Like
Yeah.
I'll put up like I'll put like a genre tag for a band and that band gets pissed at me. They're like, that's not what we are. I'm like, I don't know what you are, man. It doesn't matter what you are.
Yeah.
The fact is that you rule and I want you guys to get out to other people. And so like, actually the bands themselves don't usually get pissed. They're actually really excited. They're like, yeah, whatever. We're not really this, but we're so appreciative that there is a site that actually is doing it. It's usually like other members of that country or that scene that are like, oh man, this dude Riz really needs to learn more about the music. I'm like, hey dude, at least I'm doing something.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, it's everything, man, across the board, like whatever type of music, whatever type of genre it is, I'm always blown away. And I will say that Asia's huge, right? And people are like,
Yeah.
like, oh, tell me some of your best band. I'm like, I can't, bro. Like, Asia is so big, and every pocket is so different.
Yeah.
I will say that I personally feel more connected with the Southeast Asian scene and the Japanese scene and the Korean scene. Like those are the ones I feel like I'm more on par with in terms of ethos, ideas, definitely music, the level of the bands, the knowledge of the bands. Like those are the bands I'm like, oh, the stuff that I want to listen to, like it means a lot to me. That sounds like what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Stuff in Hong Kong or stuff in China, not necessarily is always like, I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's pretty good, but it's not what the level of what I think would be great or what I'm listening to right now.
Okay. I guess on the same subject of bands coming up, bands off the top of your head that we should look out for that's maybe on the inkling of maybe going on, they could take their band on an international level, whether it's with a label or a distro or just maybe breaking beyond Asia that hasn't quite done.
Yeah, are you talking about like specific genres or just any bands?
Or just any band that you can think.
Yeah, dude, that's hard to answer, man, because there's so many really good ones. Like I would have to literally look at like just the past 24 hours on the site. You know what I mean? But I could tell you right now, like I'll just say it like off the top of my head, right? I'm not gonna think too much about it. The bands off the top of my head that are just like bands that people should be listening to, or at least they really should be checking these bands out. Okay, so I'll tell you one band right now off the top of my head is this band called Marijana. They're like a stoner doom metal band from Singapore. They are phenomenal. Like they are so good. They got members of Wormrot in it that like people all over the world kind of quite familiar with, right? The Singaporean grindcore band. So the guitarist in that band is in Marijana. But Marijana is just this phenomenal stoner doom metal band, and they're so good, and they're just like riffs for days, just vibes for days. So that's a great band. Indonesia's got so many. There's this band called Straight Answer that's been around for 20 plus years. They're like a hardcore punk band. So like if you're thinking about more like Youth Crew style, whatever it is, like that is a great band. People should definitely be checking that out, especially because they've been around for 20 years. So it's always interesting when
Oh,
people are
okay.
like, "Oh, I've never heard of them." I'm like, I know, like I know you haven't heard of them, but you've got to
Yeah.
like pay respect to not just like the bands from LA or New York City that have been keeping it alive for 20 years. I'm like, there's bands from Jakarta, bro,
Yeah.
in Kuala Lumpur and Tokyo that have been keeping it alive. So those two bands are sick. In Korea, there's so many good bands in Korea, but right now, like the two off my top of my head that I love a lot, there's a band called Slant from Korea. They're more like a D beat, like kind of punk band.
Okay.
That band is so good. Oh my god! And they're about to release their debut album by the end of this year. But their
Okay.
EP is already up, and they're such a great, like, just raw energy, hardcore punk, but a lot of D beat in there. There's another band from Korea right now that I love a lot called Billy Carter,
Okay.
who are I won't, they're more like a post punk band, right? So they're like
Okay.
they just put a lot of different things inside. Their most recent album has got songs that sound kind of like Riot Girlish, so like Bikini Kills type of style song. But the great part about that band, like, they talk about LGBTQ rights, they talk about female
Oh,
rights, women
okay.
empowerment in Korea, and those are some great bands right there, man.
Okay. The one thing I like about these scenes, especially from Asia and maybe Latin America right now, is at a time when the music industry is going through some tough periods, going through a lot of changes, but it just seems like those scenes, there's bands out there, they're just hungry versus, whenever you see a band from America or from Europe, there's always that one person in the band that's complaining about, no, I'm not doing, when fill in the blank of whatever platform it is. They're like, they have their 20 reasons why they don't like it and why they won't take part in it, and then they don't want to do VIP this, they don't want to talk to people, they don't want to do that. But then you go to a place like Asia, they're all about it. They just live the life and they're just excited, and feel like there's a certain amount of energy that maybe the Asian scene has that maybe like the rest of the world right now is a little lacking in spots.
Wow, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think it's interesting because having lived in the States and then coming back, I do see a massive difference. You're right. I mean, that you said it so beautifully just now. I do notice that in the U.S., like I was saying earlier, that there's just so much of everything.
Hmm.
There's so much of everything. You guys, I mean, I would have to, like, I'm sorry to keep saying you guys. I know America's a big place and people are different, all that. But generally speaking, I do notice that a lot more people are jaded there. There's like, it's just too much. There's so much of
Yeah.
good stuff. Everything is great. There's bands. I mean, now you guys are going to be starving for live music.
Yeah.
You guys are going to explode. Like, COVID probably might be the best thing for your live music scene when it comes back.
Yeah.
But like, you guys are just, there's so many bands touring all the time. You literally on a Wednesday night will be like, this band, it could be like Sepulture's playing down the road, Murphy's Law is playing down the road. I don't know which one I'm going to go see. And like, we're like, what are you talking about? We're like, that band will come through Asia maybe once every 10 years. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we're definitely there. So there's that difference, right? I mean, we don't get as much as what you guys get. So I would definitely say that in terms of Asia, we're always starving, man. We're always hungry. We always want to, when a band comes through our town or a city or whatever, everyone shows up. I mean, there was a period, I'll admit, there was a period that we're kind of getting more into American style. We're like, I'm not going to go this time. Maybe I'll go next time. Like, like people didn't go to watch At the Gates when they came to Hong Kong or whatever it was. You know what I mean? And it's just like,
Yeah.
later on that night, like I honestly, I'm going to be very honest. I was sitting there an hour before At the Gates got on stage, and I was sitting at home. And I was like, I don't really want to go watch At the Gates. And I had a friend like in Singapore or whatever, like, dude, isn't At the Gates playing tonight in Hong Kong? I'm like, yeah. He's like, where are you right now? I'm like, at home. He's like, go to the show. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, that's a very good point. I really should go. So there was a period where bands were coming so often
Yeah.
that like it was impacting that vibe. But yeah, in general, like, you're absolutely right. In terms of watching other bands, Asian people, we don't get them as much. Japan's different, right? Like, that's a different place. That's a different region altogether. But the rest of us don't get it as much, so we ate it all up. Then, in terms of our own bands and our own communities, there are strong places where there's a strong ecosystem and a mentality where you support local. Just as much as you support the foreign bands, you have to support your local scene. And I would definitely say Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. These are the places where, like, oh my God, dude, I'm like, I go there and I just watch the audience lose their mind for the local band, like it's like Sick of It All or something, but it's just a
Yeah.
local band. Then when the foreign band does finally come, like the guest band, they lose their mind for that too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen in Hong Kong, man. It doesn't. Like in Hong Kong, like when the local band plays, the venue clears out.
Yeah.
Then when the foreign band comes in, every company comes back in, and the foreign band is like, man, Hong Kong rules. It's so good. I'm like, yeah, all right. It was great for you, dude. Like you probably missed the opening bands who played to like crickets, you know what I mean? And so there are just different pockets and different understandings, but overall, I would agree with you 100%. In terms of Asia, they're hungry. They're always hungry.
Yeah. So now that you have Unite Asia, you kind of planted the seeds with this. What's next? Do you have any plans of maybe starting like a little label or a distro to help bands, or is that something that you'd like to do in the future or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course I'm always thinking about the next step, and is there other projects I could start doing? And it's really not that easy. I mean, even with my own band, like 20 years, like either King Ly Chee or the band Dagger that I'm in now, it really is frustrating because I know as a label, like I mean, like when you're running your own band, it's kind of like you're running your own label, right? I mean, like you get orders in, you send them out, and it's such a pain in the ass to mail things out, man. It's not easy. Like, especially right now in the US, like if you mail stuff out, like it's God, you got to fill out like customs forms, like it's not easy. So like in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I've always thought about maybe I'll do like you know, a limited edition type of label. Like they only have like a limited run of something that's awesome where I bring a couple bands together.
Yeah.
But then I think about like the logistics of it. I'm like, hell no. I'm like, I'm not dealing with all that crap. That just sounds like pure hell. Like to distro all the stuff yourself. So I don't really know. I haven't figured out something. Like no one's offered me or given me a project idea where I'm like, that sounds good. I mean, I would say like the most recent thing that I've tried is the podcast.
Yeah.
So I was doing the Unite Asia podcast for about 2 months, and then like I just kind of like took a break from it because that was hard putting it all together too. It was a great experience. It was just too hard. It was too hard to like, you know, schedule the time like you're doing right now, schedule the time, but then to like edit the video, because I mean a lot of the people I interview, English may not be their first language, so they're kind of shy and like. So like after like an hour and a half long of recording the podcast, I would have to go sit and spend like hours and hours of like just going through it again, editing it, cutting it all out. It was hard, man. It was hard. So the podcast was a good trial run to do something, but it wasn't like, I'm just not in that point in my life where I'm like, well, I'll continue to struggle and keep pushing something out until it clicks. I'm really not that kind of guy right now. Like I'm like, if I do something and it works, great, I'm running with it. If I do something and I try my best and it doesn't work, I'm like, move on to the next thing. So
you're balancing a day job along with all this, is that right? Or
yeah, I'm a classroom teacher. I teach first graders, so I teach 6-year-olds.
Oh, nice. Do you have a lot of kids?
So I do that all day. So I get to work. Sorry, what was that?
Oh no. If you have kids in your class that are like the next generation punk rockers in Hong Kong.
I think honest, like true metalheads and true punk rockers and hardcore kids, like the diehards, we will always see it in somebody else. We're like, you know, like we're the ones who are like, you don't have to actually listen to punk rock to be a punk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to be like listen to hardcore to be a hardcore kid. It's because we know it's a mentality, man. It's like, it's a mentality. It's an attitude. How do you live your life? How do you interact with other people? So you're right. There's certain kids in my classroom. I'm like, man, you're going to love metal when you grow up. You already have that. Like, I don't want to say defiant, you know what I mean? Cause like, I don't want to say that, but like the kind of kids who question why we have to do a certain way. And I love those kids, man. Those are the best. They're like, why do we have to do it that way? I'm like, brilliant question. Let me explain why we do something. Anytime I teach you something or ask you to do something, you don't understand why, ask me, because that's the best thing to do, is always question authority, right? Question, why do you ask me to do this the certain way that I'm doing it? Yeah.
Okay. And then you've been mentioning the Daggers. So how long have you been doing this band? And tell me a little bit about this new project you've been working on.
Yeah, Dagger started in 2017-ish. And really, like I was saying earlier, is like I've always been a guitarist. So I've been playing guitar since I was 9 or 10-ish years old. and I just write all the riffs. I mean, even with King Ly Chee, I was the main songwriter. So, and I started as a guitar vocalist in King Ly Chee. And it's like by '07 or something like that, we couldn't find another vocal. Like, I mean, we were just going through a lot of lineup changes or whatever. And
Okay.
I'm a very stubborn guy, dude. I don't give up on things easily. So I was like, no, we're gonna make this work. I'm like, I'll just sing. Because I was already singing parts of the songs anyway. By that point, so I put the guitar down and I've just been singing from '07 onwards. And so like I was just getting that itch. I was like, oh, I need to get back to playing guitar. I need to I just love riffs. And so by that time, I was just like listening to all like my favorite '90s bands again, like Snapcase and Strife and all that, like, Turmoil, the stuff that's a little bit more metallic, but hardcore.
Yeah.
And by that time, 2017, 2016, King Ly Chee, honestly, very honestly, was no longer connecting with people in Hong Kong. It just wasn't. We, as a band, King Ly Chee was becoming even more traditional sounding, more hardcore, more punk rock. And in Hong Kong, that shit just does not fly, man. Here in Hong Kong, people love metal. Here in Hong Kong, they love technical stuff like Dream Theater or Periphery. Like that type of stuff is what Hong Kong people eat up. And so we're like, there's even more of a gap, like in being honest, like, the show before we toured the US, we kind of like did like a hometown show. We had 29 people show up, bro. Like it was 29 people show up. It was just like, so it was just kind of like a reality check. And so by the end of 2016 into 2017, I was just like, what can I do to kind of reconnect? And I was like, well, let me think back to what really got me into music. I was like, metal, like the metal stuff. But I knew that I didn't want to play in a metal band, you know what I mean? So I was like, oh, dude, the reason why those '90s bands connected with you so much was because there was a hardcore bass, but they were like hardcore kids playing metal.
Yeah,
that was the beauty of the metallic hardcore era. Turmoil, early Converge, all that stuff. Are like, oh, I could kind of hear the hardcoreness in it, but it's very metal sounding. And so I was like, I'll start doing that again, man. And I remember that, and like immediately songs and riffs just came out, and like, so that was the main catalyst. It was in January 2017. I got that band together. Like by May, we'd already released our debut EP and stuff. And
nice.
That, honestly, I would say, I can't believe that I was actually right about something. But when that band first came out, that reconnected with Hong Kong immediately. People were like, oh, is this the new King Ly Chee? Is it the new direction? I'm like, no, it's not. It's not King Ly Chee at all. They're like, this is what you should do. Just do this.
Okay.
And I was like, fuck you, dude. I was like, King Ly Chee rules. You don't even know. You know what I mean? They're like, no. He's like, no. I respect King Ly Chee and everything that you guys done. Yeah. Great. He's like, but this musically is so much better. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like what Dagger's been. It's kind of more like just like, don't put parameters around yourself. Do whatever you want to do, and that's the beauty of Dagger. We're like, add a D beat, sure. Add blast beats, great. Add a doom stoner part, excellent. And it's just like, that's just been the beauty of the band. Just kind of just keep it open. And I had no idea it would connect with not just people in Hong Kong, connect with people all over the world.
Okay. I don't want to make this too much of a political thing, but with all the things that we hear about Hong Kong from the rest of the world, how much of all the political tension, how has that affected the music scene? Does it seem like, I mean, other than the fact that COVID probably is preventing you from playing shows there too, but has that changed the attitude of music in terms of finding like heavier music, maybe angrier music to kind of to let their emotions out more than usual? Or
you would think, right? That's you would think that Hong Kong is going to become a lot more aggressive, a lot more angry, a lot more punk rock and attitude, and then that's I found the opposite happening here. I mean, I that the stuff that has happened the past couple of years is definitely people are definitely angry, but people are depressed, people are sad, people are like it's so what happens in Hong Kong is that we as a city, as a culture, we go more into like doom and gloom kind of vibe, doom and gloom kind of attitude. Even though we have a never give up attitude, we definitely have a very strong fuck you attitude here in Hong Kong. That doesn't mean it connects with then I'm going to play more punk rock music. I'm going to play more aggressive, loud, screaming music. That's not the case here. Usually what I've noticed is that a lot more goes into more like thoughtful type of music, a lot more post rock and things like that. A lot more, like shoegazy type of stuff. So that's kind of like what's taken off in Hong Kong, really. The scary thing is that since July 1st, this whole national security law has been enacted into law, right? So that has, I would say it's almost kind of like put the kibosh on everything right now. Right now, people
Yeah.
don't know what's lawful, what's not. They don't know what they can sing about. They don't know what lyrics they can sing about. Like, I'm still waiting for like the knock at the door because of the lyrics that we sing in Dagger, and like, because we were very socio-political in Dagger. And if you watch the Dagger videos, we didn't hide anything, man. We didn't hold anything back, because at the time that we were writing that music, we were allowed to do that. We were allowed to question. We were allowed to have full freedom for art and music and expression. Where now it's just like more and more like, no, man, everything you say or do, like, you have to be careful. So people
Yeah.
self-censor like crazy in Hong Kong right now. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for our city.
Okay. So you personally don't see yourself relocating elsewhere if things take a weird turn, or like, I know a lot of people in Hong Kong have moved to other places just to kind of, they don't want to deal with it anymore. But is that something that's ever crossed your mind?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I have a, I'm married. I've got a daughter, so of course we've been thinking about that as well. Like, I mean, I'm not someone that gives up. Like I said earlier, that no matter how hard something is, I'm such a resilient, kind of like stubborn resilient. I mean, I don't mean it in a positive way. I mean, stupid resilient, stupid stubborn. Like, like in that regard, like, I'll just see things through. But I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. We've definitely looked at Taiwan. We looked at the UK. Like, we've looked at other places. We have not looked at the US. You guys are crazy. You guys are nuts. It does not sound like the safest place on the planet to be right now. But we have, and we're kind of like, just honestly, I'm not lying. We're everyone in Hong Kong I know is going day by day, right? They're like, what's the new thing? What's the next thing we're not allowed to do anymore? Like, literally in Hong Kong, I don't know if you could see it. Yeah, you can't see it, but there's actual a phrase that we're no longer allowed to say in Hong Kong, which is mind blowing to us, man. I mean, used to be a bastion for freedom. Like, we could say whatever we wanted to. We could have posters of whatever we wanted to. Like, literally, people are now getting arrested for a flag. People are getting arrested for sentences. Books are being taken off of library shelves, and it's just. So I mean, we can't. No, I don't know. Many people are planning years down the road. They're just like, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen next week?
Yeah. Yeah, I see your tweets, and it's like what you post about what's going on and what we see in the news are two kind of like opposite ends of the extreme. And because I guess over here they like to share like the worst of it, like who's getting their head kicked in or going after, and then that's one piece of the puzzle. But then most people here don't really understand what the root of the problem is. So everyone's kind of got their preconceived notion and then like to run with it, which they don't seem to understand the real history behind it. So, okay, cool. So I guess I couldn't wind this up. So else coming up for United Asia, the Dagger, or anything else that you got going on you'd like to plug?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know why I'm going to plug this, but I am working on starting a new band, because just similar to like how I started Dagger and I was dying to like get back on guitar. The past 4 years in Dagger, now I'm dying to get back on vocals. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So currently working on a project with an old drummer in King Ly Chee. So we're hopefully by December, that's going to come out. We'll start like old school style, but like you will either put like a demo out or something like that. We kind of wanted to do it like legit. It's going to be definitely more hardcore punkish, and just because I've got a lot, man. I've got a lot to say. Like, hopefully you're noticing that this guy just talks forever, and so
No, that's good.
Yeah, so like that's like really my project for now, and then we just keep it going, man. Just keep it going. Keep helping the bands that are from our scene in our community. It's definitely not about me. It's definitely not about my own bands. It's always been about how do we make this scene and this community grow together. And like, I honestly have seen a huge change in the past few years. And I don't want to say it's because of United Asia. I don't think that's the case. But I do see a lot more people coming together. I see a community forming, like on all my socials, like in IG, Twitter, and Facebook. You can just kind of see this group of people, like it just gets bigger and bigger, people communicating with each other. It's so cool. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, I just used to see your name pop up on every like, you know what I mean? On every post, like these 5 or 6 people would always like it, regardless if they've actually checked out the post or not. They just support it. They'll click like on it. And that group of lists has gotten bigger and bigger. So
Yeah.
it's just cool to see that in Asia, there is this continued growth and people are continuing to do awesome things, and regardless of United Asia or not, people are already doing these awesome things. It's just like we're exposing it a little bit more. So, I think it's just all good things, man.
All right, cool. And if people want to find you, many links on socials, if you want to plug that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think, of course, would be go to unitedasia.org. Like that's the main site, unitedasia.org, and then we're on everything, right? You know, you can go to the Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. We're alive in all those things, and it's just so interesting. Like in this day and age, you have to be active in all of those because people are so lazy. Some people are like only on Twitter, or only on Instagram, or only on Facebook, and you're like, oh, I gotta repost here, I gotta repost there, I gotta repost there.
Yeah.
And like each audience has a different way of consuming that, right? Like Twitter is like minimal information. Instagram can be a little bit more. Facebook can be bigger. Unite Asia. So I'm always just like, just go to unitedasia.org. That's like the main thing. And then all the links are there.
What about the Dagger? Where can we find that?
Same thing. So if you go to facebook.com and Dagger, like a lot of Hong Kong bands, we're mainly alive on Facebook.
Okay.
And mainly alive on Instagram. Those are like our main ones. Facebook is like definitely the bread and butter in Hong Kong. So you can find us on that. We're of course on Bandcamp. We're on Spotify and all that stuff. I hate Spotify, so don't go there. Go to our Bandcamp. And usually our you can either get to us like, you know, it's either like facebook.com/Dagger or it's facebook.com/Dagger Hong Kong. Like one of those links.
Oh, okay. Cool. And do you have a name for your other band that you just mentioned yet, or?
I do, but you know what I've noticed is like there's so many millions of bands. I don't want to put the name out there and somebody else takes it. People are assholes.
Oh, okay.
I'm surprised that no one's taken this band name. I'm like, really? That would be kind of a typical name, but it didn't. We looked it up, and like we're very careful now. We've noticed that we've learned of that about band names, and especially with Unite Asia, man. I'll see a band put out their band like, oh yeah, we just released our first single. I'm like, you didn't know there's 30 other bands from your own country that made that?
Yeah. Just put it under your own name, then they can't steal it. So
yeah, that was the beauty about King Ly Chee. Like people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's just a name that no one would have thought of. There is a meaning to it, but like I'm like, it's something that is unique.
Yeah. I just happened to find it. I think one day I was just Googling just out of curiosity. I went, okay, Hong Kong like hardcore bands, just to see what would pop up, and then there goes your video. I'm like, wow, Lou from Sick of All did a song with a band from Hong Kong. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for taking the time. I wish there were more people in the States and around the world that would do that. That would kind of be interested. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. Like I said, your country's so big, it's so hard to generalize. But I mean, I just wish there was more of that communication back and forth, a connection back and forth. And there are people that do that. Like, I mean, in terms of hardcore, there's this website called In Effect. And Chris that runs In Effect does such a great job, dude. That guy loves worldwide hardcore. He lives it. Yeah. He's one of my favorite dudes, and he really does. He always reaches out to me. He's one of the first people, like when King Ly Chee announced the tour in the States, he's like, hey, let's do an interview. I was like, really? I'm like, hell yeah, man. And he gave me like, dude, he let me run wild. Like, you should see some of the answers. My answers are like pages long because I was like, I've never got this opportunity to get an interview with an American media, especially hardcore specific. So I was like, I don't know if they'll get this chance again. Yeah. So I just wish there was more of that kind of back and forth because, you know, Americans need to know. I mean, unfortunately for now, in terms of pop culture, America still runs the world. You know what I mean? Like American bands still run the world. Like people in Asia get more excited about a demo released by some stupid ass band from like Rochester, New York, more so than a band from like Taipei, Taiwan. And you're like, yo, we're closer to Taipei than we are to Rochester, motherfucker. Like, you should be like, get excited about that band. But it's still that Americans, like American bands, you know, still the cream of the crop are still American bands. So I just wish more American bands would be, or people would just be like, oh yeah, you know, like I love that you guys love us so much. Let me try to reciprocate that a little bit. And try to take some interest in the communities that support my band so much that for me to support those communities as well.
America is a weird country because I guess it depends on which part of the country you live in, and everyone's in their own little clique. So I think finally it's like, even I live in Los Angeles, so you know, people here support SoCal hardcore, but then But then if you hear about a band from, say, like Oregon, which is like the next state over, everyone's like, I have no idea who that is unless they come through like here. I mean, they might know some bands from like Seattle or maybe like Phoenix, Arizona or something. But then if you're talking about a band from like Middle America, unless you're signed to a label like a Victory Records or someone like that, no one would have a clue who the world these bands are. So it's always it's a tricky situation in terms of discovering bands. So I mean, it's like once in a while, it's like there's always the run of the mill Japanese band that shows up to town here and they'll play a few shows, kind of like what you did in the East Coast, and they have their little fan base. But then again, there's also the financial factor to get across.
Yes.
That's the other challenge. So
Right.
So I get it. So, but cool. So yeah, so I'm looking at the future of Unite Asia and see what you do, and hopefully you can make some inroads and blow that scene up and make it into like maybe some kind of a superpower of some sort.
Yeah, Ray, I just last words. I mean, definitely thank you so much for taking this time, and like
Oh, no problem.
I appreciate all like the the communication back and forth, the interactions that you and I have had on Twitter and stuff. And it's just always thoughtful, right? I mean, it's very thoughtful the way you communicate, the way you interact, the way you retweet stuff, so that people around your circle of friends and your community are aware that this stuff exists, and that you're giving me this platform right now to be like, hopefully someone's listening might be like, yo, I might really spend some time and check out this site that this guy's talking about. And honestly, a lot of people that I do who finally do get to uniteasia.org, they sit there for hours, man. I know, I get the statistics, you know what I mean? So some people, not a lot, I'm not saying everyone, a lot of people in this world have the shortest attention span right now. But a lot of people that do get on, they're on there for hours. They're like, well, I didn't know there's this punk band in Korea and another one. And so enjoy, man. People should just take their time and enjoy all the stuff that's on the site.
Yeah. I mean, look at these bands in Europe. I mean, it's like now you got these bands out of the former Soviet Union, like Ginger and Infected Rain. I mean, I don't know what kind of scene they have over there, but somewhere magically in a little country called Ukraine, there's a band that came out, and they got one of the biggest bands coming out in the last few years.
Totally.
And look at a band like Behemoth. They didn't, it until they're known. It's not like they started yesterday. So it took some time, but hopefully some of these bands in Hong Kong will get a chance. So
yeah, I mean, we got great bands in Hong Kong. I mean, I could right off the top of my head, if I would promote anything, there's this metal band that everyone should be listening to. Is a band called Evocation, not the one from Europe. There's a band from Hong Kong called Evocation, and they are phenomenal. What I love about them is because sometimes people are annoying about this, right? Some people are like, oh, a band from Asia. You're like, oh, why do you guys sound like you're from New York? You're like, dude, that's because that's the music they listen to. Like, I hate when people are like, oh, it's from Asia. I was hoping there would be some Asian elements in it. I'm like, oh my God, you sound so white. You know what I mean? And but Evocation is one of those bands that is just like, they're like, how do I add some Chinese elements into our music and keep it metal? You know what I mean? Still keep it metal. And so they're like a death metal, black metal. They combine all of these things, but then they add all these like elements in Asian culture, like things for like Chinese culture in terms of like ghosts and death and like, dude, it's so good. It's amazing. That is like number one band from Hong Kong that I always push on people. I'm like, you got to go check out Evocation. For me, they're the band that makes me proud to be someone from Hong Kong. They're so good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's bands like your neighboring countries, like a band like The Who is starting to make little inroads. I mean, they're not a metal band, and then you got bands like Tonic, who from Taiwan. We'll see if there's some other bands. I mean, I know with Tonic, it's like Freddie can't really tour as much as he did in the past, so because he's doing his political thing, but still, it's a gateway. It takes one band to actually do something, and then then you have the chain effect. So
yeah.
All right, cool. So cool. So thanks for doing the interviews. So
no problem, man. Thanks for taking the time, Ray.
Yeah.